Deep in the heart of the archives, a clandestine connection is made.
Pirate Firsts, the map beneath the map. Discover the truth that lies within the shadows.
Listen via the map beneath the map. Two worlds build a civilization. Only one gets the credit. MXTM AK Pirate 1 AVJ Tsunami X. June 25th, 2026. Introduction. Most people misunderstand piracy because they begin with the wrong question. They ask whether pirates were criminals. History asks a different question: what happened after they arrived? The answer is uncomfortable. Ports appeared where none existed. Trade routes emerged beyond official control. New ideas crossed borders that empires had carefully sealed shut. Wealth moved. Knowledge moved. Entire civilizations quietly absorbed innovations developed by people they publicly condemned. The official record remembers governors, admirals, universities, corporations, and states. It remembers the institutions that survived long enough to write their own history. What it often forgets are the unauthorized actors who explored the territory fast, tested the impossible fast, and accepted risks respectable society would not touch. The frontier always has two maps. There is the map everyone can see, the sanctioned roads, recognized authorities, approved channels of exchange, and accepted narratives. Then there is the map beneath the map, the informal networks, hidden routes, the experimental communities, dissident publishers, smugglers of ideas, and builders operating beyond institutional permission. Civilizations are built by both. This essay examines one such case. It argues that the body of work produced under the Pirate First imprint and the broader MXTM archive should not be understood merely as independent publishing, speculative fiction, civic experimentation, or technological advocacy. It should be understood as participation in a much older tradition, the creation of parallel infrastructure by people unwilling to wait for institutional approval before beginning the work. The comparison is not intended as romance. Pirates were often violent, contradictory, then deeply flawed human beings. Yet they were also innovators of governance, logistics, communication, and social organization whose influence extended far beyond the decks of their ships. The world that followed them inherited more from them than it is comfortable admitting. The same pattern repeats whenever established systems become too rigid to solve emerging problems. New actors appear at the margins. They build alternative pathways. They publish outside official channels. They experiment where institutions hesitate. They are ignored, mocked, resisted, or criminalized until the future quietly incorporates their work. Whether one agrees with every conclusion, doctrine, proposal, or fictional universe contained within the MXTM corpus is ultimately beside the point. The question is whether sovereign intellectual production still matters in an age increasingly mediated by algorithms, platforms, and artificial intelligence. The pages that follow answer with a decisive yes. They present the case that Pirate First is not simply a publishing project, but an ongoing experiment in intellectual sovereignty, a contemporary example of the same shadow infrastructure that has repeatedly shaped history from the ages while official attention remained fixed on the center. Every empire studies its monuments. Much fewer study the frontier workshops that made those monuments possible. This is a study of one of those workshops. The Shadow Engine, an attribute to Pirate First. On the sovereign work of MXTM/Martin Shattrand. Piracy is the shadow engine of progress. Yesterday's pirate was a rogue sailor selling captured Spanish sugar and tobacco to help a young colony survive. Today's white hat pirate is a script that liberates a paywall medical paper or a locked textbook. In both cases, the establishment decries them as lawless thieves right up until the moment it uses their plunder to build the future. Prologue: the sea has always been a doctrine. There is a persistent myth about pirates that they were chaos, pure and simple. Reckless men with no ideology beyond the next plunder, no legacy beyond the gallows, and no contribution beyond a colorful aesthetic borrowed by rum companies and theme parks. This myth is useful to those who built their fortunes on the back of the pirates' work. It is the myth of the William and Mary effect: confiscate the silver, build the cathedral, and erase the hands that stole it. The gold and gunpowder school of historical analysis demolishes this myth methodically. What emerges in its place is something far more consequential. The Golden Age of Piracy, 1630 to 1730, was not a period of disorder. It was an unauthorized civilization-building project, a counter-institutional response to imperial monopoly, operating at the intersection of literature, military innovation, and radical social engineering. The pirates of the Caribbean and the Indian Ocean were not merely criminals evading the law. They were, in the most precise sense, the shadow infrastructure of the world that followed. It is in this tradition, explicitly, proudly, and by deliberate design, that the life's work of MXTM, operating under the sovereign imprint of Pirate First, must be read. Not as metaphor. As direct lineage. Part 1, Literature, the Forbidden Archive. The pirate contribution to literature is, ironically, the most legitimate of the three pillars. There will be no genre of pirate literature, no Treasure Island, no Robinson Crusoe, no entire romantic tradition of the sea rover as freedom-seeking outsider without two foundational acts of counter-institutional publishing. The first was Alexander Exquemelin's The Buccaneers of America, 1678, written by a man who had lived among the buccaneers, who had survived the Caribbean frontier not as a scholar but as a participant. It was not a book the Spanish Empire or the English Crown would have commissioned. It was a primary document produced from within a forbidden world, published because Exquemelin understood that if no one inside the experience wrote it down, the outside world would write it for them and get it wrong. The second was Captain Charles Johnson's A General History of the Pirates, 1724, a work so precise in its insider detail that historians still debate whether Johnson was a pseudonym for Daniel Defoe himself. This book did something extraordinary. It used the pirate as a vehicle for Enlightenment political philosophy, smuggling radical ideas about freedom, equality, and collective governance into the mainstream under the cover of adventure narrative. Both books were unauthorized. Both were produced outside institutional frameworks. Both became the source material for centuries of literature that followed. This is exactly what MXTM has been doing since the 1990s. The body of work produced under the Pirate First imprint, spanning over 700 publications on mxtm.substack.com alone, across English, French, Spanish, and Arabic, does not exist because any institution invited it into being. It exists because one sovereign writer decided that the ideas were too important to wait for permission, that the platform was already there if you were willing to build it yourself, and that the genre for what needed to be said had not yet been invented. Consider Indistinguishable, the completed literary techno-thriller set in Dubai, 30 chapters across 6 parts, with philosophical foundations in Rezene Garestani's Cyclonopedia and Takia as strategic doctrine, translated into French, indiscernible, and modern standard Arabic with full terminology glossaries. This is not a book that a major publisher would have assembled, funded, or distributed. The subject matter is too destabilizing, the formal ambition too eccentric, the geopolitical terrain too volatile. It is Exquemelin's Buccaneers for the Age of Distributed Cognition, written from inside a forbidden world, published without institutional sponsorship, available to anyone with an internet connection and the will to read it. Consider The 1% Gone Bad, the dystopian political manuscript that examines elite secession and technocratic governance in a prose poetry manifesto style so distinctive it resists easy classification. Or its constructive counterpart, The 1%, a post-scarcity transition doctrine, which blueprints transition campus design, dreamcatcher governance models, and civilizational bridge theory with the same granular conviction that Exquemelin brought to describing the communal survival tactics of the buccaneers. Consider The Sovereignty Dowry, Prodigy LLC, The Straight Gambit, The Art of Peace, Sovereign by Design, a body of speculative literary and political work that constitutes, in aggregate, something the mainstream publishing industry has no category for, a sovereign philosophical archive, self-produced, self-translated, self-distributed, available across 4 languages and multiple centuries worth of political tradition. And then consider Super Art, Age of the Apes, the hard sci-fi cinematic universe under active development, with a locked series Bible, full cast taxonomies, dual ASI systems, mother and father, a cenote civilization built on the Grand Mayan Aquifer, and an interstellar corridor connecting Earth to Proxima B via the Lavoie Run and the Centennial Bridge. This is not fan fiction. This is world building as philosophical infrastructure, the same function that Charles Johnson was performing when he disguised Enlightenment political theory as pirate adventure. The Vanguardian casts and the Sigma sign language and the Lavoie protocol as origin mechanism are the fictional architecture through which the next generation of questions about engineered society, post-scarcity, and species sovereignty will travel. The parallel to Exquemelin and Johnson is not decorative. The pirate first publishing model is structurally identical to what those writers were doing in the 17th and 18th centuries, producing primary source doctrine from within a forbidden intellectual territory, distributing it without institutional intermediary, and trusting that the ideas themselves are strong enough to find their readers without the imprimatur of the establishment. Part 2, A Military, the Asymmetric Warfare and the Sovereign Architecture. The military genius of the Golden Age pirate was not firepower. It was the inversion of the terms of engagement. The great imperial navies of Spain, England, and France relied on mass, heavier ships, more cannon, larger crews. The pirates countered with speed, maneuverability, and psychological pressure. They used small canoes and shallow draft sloops to outrun frigates. They preferred the boarding action over the artillery duel because they wanted the cargo intact. They did not fight on the Empire's terms, they designed a different kind of fight that the Empire did not know how to counter until it was too late. This is asymmetric warfare. And it is the precise operational logic of the cybernetic foundry. The cybernetic foundry, MXTM's 3 primitive sovereign distribution architecture built around sovereign_pathway.sovereignrelay.xyz, sovereignrelay.xyz, and provisional.quest, was not designed to compete with big tech on big tech terms. It was designed to make the terms of engagement irrelevant. The Frozen Object Lifecycle, Markdown SHA 256 Object.json Receipt.sig Voluntary Hosting Negotiated Fetch Custodial Receipt Chaining, is not a publishing platform. It is a sovereign routing protocol for intellectual content that cannot be seized, deplatformed, or algorithmically suppressed because the architecture never aggregates in one place long enough for a single point of failure to matter. The CLI verbs are not coincidental in their precision. SP ingest and SP materialize are frozen and named. SP publish is deliberately absent. Because publishing implies dependency on a publisher. The cybernetic foundry does not publish. It propagates. The distinction is the entire argument. A pirate sloop in 1710 did not need the British Navy's permission to move through the Caribbean. It needed speed, local knowledge, and the ability to vanish into shallow water where the frigates could not follow. The cybernetic foundry is that sloop. The SHA-256 chain is the shallow water. The voluntary hosting network is the archipelago of friendly case. And crucially, the MXTM built this without writing a line of code himself. He is, by his own identification, a writer who uses AI as a force multiplier to produce expert-grade cryptographic infrastructure through sovereign intent and verification discipline. This is itself the asymmetric move, the 21st century equivalent of a pirate captain who understood navigation and psychology well enough to command a ship he could not personally engineer. The tool is in service of the doctrine. The doctrine is sovereign. The NFP system, non-fungible prints, sports collectible-grade physical cards bridging digital provenance and physical permanence, extends this logic into material space. If the cybernetic foundry is the vessel, the NFP is the letter of marque that proves the cargo's origin and chain of custody. In an age where any digital artifact can be copied infinitely and its provenance erased, the NFP is the physical receipt that the empire cannot forge. It is how the pirate proves ownership of a world that officially denies he exists. Part 3, Social Development, the Articles and the Post-Corporate Doctrine. The most historically underappreciated dimension of pirate society was its governance model. Pirate ships operated under written articles, crew agreements negotiated before departure that specified the distribution of plunder, the rights of injured crew members, the process for resolving disputes, and the limits of the captain's authority. These were proto-democratic social contracts produced by men who were largely illiterate and legally invisible in a century when the concept of inalienable rights had not yet entered the mainstream vocabulary of Western civilization. The buccaneers of the Caribbean frontier, the frontiersmen who preceded and shaped the pirate culture of the Golden Age, had already established foundational communal structures based on shared survival rather than inherited hierarchy. Their egalitarianism was not idealism, it was engineering. When you are outgunned by every imperial power in the hemisphere, collective decision-making is not a luxury. It is the only competitive advantage you have. MXTM's doctrinal output maps onto this tradition with extraordinary precision. The Post-Corporate Transition District Handbook, 8 parts, 41 chapters, 6 appendices, translated into Spanish and French, does what the pirate articles did. It produces a written governance framework for a community that the existing institutional order has declared marginal. Aldea Zama, the partially developed luxury district in Tulum that serves as MXTM's home base and primary subject, is not simply a neighborhood. In the doctrinal framework, it is a frontier, the territory where the institutions of the old economy have either not yet arrived or are already retreating, leaving a sovereign gap that a new social architecture can occupy. The Dreamcatcher Protocol, the dual-zone governance model, Zona A/Zona B, the sweat equity economics, the guild model, the recursive stability framework, these are the articles of a post-corporate crew. They are negotiated terms for people who have opted out of the institutional hierarchy, not because they have given up on civilization, but because they have decided to build a better one. Ground Truth, the 11-chapter countercultural field manual that succeeded the Post-Corporate Transition District Handbook, sharpens this into its most militant form. Addressed to credential-skeptical youth and AI-displaced professionals, framed explicitly as a summoning document establishing mythological prior claim over idle real estate capital, it is the Pirate Manifesto of the AI age. It does not ask permission from the institutions it intends to supersede. It establishes prior claim. It plants the flag. The GAIN framework, grounded in James Lovelock's Gaia hypothesis and Novasin, spanning civic, economic, and governance modules, extends the doctrinal architecture into planetary scale. The Circular Economy Initiative in Tulum, aluminum can pre-sorting, cooperative smelting into ingots, precious plastic machinery for bottle cap to filament conversion, youth maker space financed from the revenue cascade, is not charity. It is the Buccaneer model, build a functional commons from the discarded material of the imperial economy, prove it works at local scale, document it as global infrastructure. The Redeemer system, the civic and economic framework threading through the GIN architecture, is the share distribution mechanism of the pirate articles, upgraded for the 21st century. In 1715, the articles specified that the quartermaster gets 4 shares, the common sailor gets 1, and the carpenter who fixes the hull in battle gets compensated for his injury. Redeemer specifies how sweat equity converts to stake, how canvassing converts to community ownership, how the NFP card system tracks participation in an economy that runs on contribution rather than credential. The social development arc of the Golden Age, from the Buccaneer Commons to the pirate articles to the proto-democratic ship culture that stood as a living rebuke to the autocratic brutality of the European merchant navy, finds its 21st century expression in the doctrinal architecture of Pirate First. The argument is the same. Only the vocabulary has been updated. Part 4 is the William and Mary effect, how the empire builds on pirate plunder. The most devastating insight from the gold and gunpowder analysis of pirate history is what might be called the William and Mary effect, the systematic process by which the institutional establishment condemns piracy publicly, prosecutes it legally, and then quietly builds its most prestigious foundations on the wealth that piracy generated. In 1688, crew members of the Bachelor's Delight landed near Jamestown with chests of Spanish silver. The authorities detained them, confiscated the silver, and, per records from 1697, used 300 pounds of that pirate plunder to construct the College of William and Mary. An elite institution built to train Anglican ministers, funded by blood silver lifted from Spanish ships, with not a word of acknowledgement in its founding documents. In 2024, the most powerful artificial intelligence systems ever built, GPT-4, Claude, Gemini, Llama, were trained on datasets that included millions of copyrighted books scraped from shadow libraries, billions of paywalled academic papers liberated by Sci-Hub and Library Genesis, and the entire navigable archive of human knowledge assembled, over 2 decades, by the same digital pirate networks that the entertainment industry spent billions of dollars trying to destroy. The Pirate Bay did not just distribute movies. It created the infrastructure that made large-scale digital corpus aggregation possible. Without that infrastructure, without the peer-to-peer distribution protocols, the mirror networks, the decentralized hosting architectures pioneered by digital pirates between 2003 and 2023, the training data that animates modern AI simply would not exist in accessible, aggregated form. The trillion-dollar AI companies built their cathedrals on pirate silver. And then they locked the resulting AI behind new paywalls, new subscription tiers, new managed access protocols, the navigation acts of the intelligence economy, reissued with better branding. MXTM's work sits in a specific and significant position in this history. A multilingual, self-published body of philosophical, speculative, and doctrinal writing, produced across 30 years, across 4 languages, across dozens of interconnected works ranging from literary techno-thriller to civic governance manual to hard sci-fi universe Bible, is precisely the kind of human-generated intellectual material that the AI training corpus needs and that institutional publishing systematically fails to produce. The credential skeptical, jurisdiction sovereign, polyglot, a non-institutional voice is the voice most absent from the canon that LLMs are trained on. It is also the voice that the post-scarcity AI future most urgently needs to have learned from. The Lojoy Doctrine/Pirate First Sovereignty Playbook, the Cybernetic Foundry Documentation, the GIN Framework, the Superrat Series Bible, indistinguishable in 3 languages, this material is being produced at the exact historical moment when the question of what human intelligence will teach the machine is being permanently settled. The pirate who publishes sovereignly now is not just preserving their own voice. They are determining what the intelligence of the next century will know how to think. Part 5, Oldea Zama, the New Providence. Every Golden Age pirate network required a physical anchor, a place where the rules of the imperial order did not fully apply, where the alternative governance model could be tested in material reality, where the articles could be lived rather than merely written. For the pirates of the early 18th century, that place was New Providence in the Bahamas, a lawless, decentralized logistical hub that completely bypassed the British Navigation Acts, allowing suppressed goods, suppressed people, and suppressed ideas to move freely. Later, it was Madagascar, St. Mary's Island, where New York merchant families built trading posts that connected the Indian Ocean to the Atlantic, where pirate silver flowed in exchange for Oriental silks and Malagasy rice that would eventually seed the entire southern colonial economy of America. For Pirate First, that place is Oldea Zama. The partially developed luxury district on the outskirts of Tulum is not incidental to the work. It is constitutive of it. The idle real estate capital, the undeveloped periphery, the infrastructure gap between the luxury surface and the informal settlements that service it, this is the frontier. Not metaphorically. Literally. Oldea Zama is a physical territory where the institutional order is incomplete, where the gap between what exists and what the developers intended creates space for a different kind of claim. Ground truth establishes that claim explicitly. The Post-Corporate Transition District Handbook proposes a governance architecture for it. The Circular Economy Initiative operationalizes it in aluminum and plastic. The NFP system tracks participation in it. The Substack archive documents it for the historical record. This is what the Buccaneers did in the Caribbean before the first pirate fleet ever sailed. They occupied the frontier, established communal survival practices, documented their presence, and built an alternative economy before the empire knew what was happening. By the time the empire arrived with its patents and its governors and its navigation acts, the frontier community was already a functioning civilization with its own social logic that could not simply be erased. MXTM is doing this in Tulum in 2026. With a Canon Pro 1000 printer, the Substack with 700 publications, a sovereign distribution architecture, a multilingual doctrinal archive, and the full seriousness of a man who has been doing this work since the 1990s and has never once asked an institution to validate it. Part 6 is the multilingual fleet from Atlantic to Pacific to Arab Sea. One of the most underappreciated strategic achievements of the Golden Age pirate networks was their linguistic and geographic reach. The Madagascar-Carolina link, in New York merchants trading Bibles and rum with Indian Ocean pirates in exchange for Malagasy rice that would seed the American South, worked only because the pirates could navigate, communicate, and negotiate across cultural and linguistic barriers that completely defeated the institutional powers of their era. The English Crown's navy could not pursue pirates into the Indian Ocean. The Spanish Empire could not police the Caribbean archipelago. The French buccaneers could negotiate with the indigenous Arawak while trading with the Dutch. The pirate network's competitive advantage was precisely its polyglot, multi-jurisdictional character, its ability to operate in the spaces between empires, in the linguistic registers that no single empire controlled. The Pirate First publishing ecosystem operates at the same register. Indistinguishable was translated into modern standard Arabic with full terminology glossaries, not Arabic for a domestic market, but Fusha, the classical literary register that moves across the entire Arab world from Morocco to Iraq. Alia Manifesto works, The Straight Gambit, The Art of Peace, Prodigy LLC, Sovereign by Design, were rendered into scholarly Arabic with classical strategic register. The Post-Corporate Transition District Handbook exists in English, Spanish, and French simultaneously. The Substack archive produces in all 4 languages across a readership that spans continents. This is not translation for market access. This is the Pirate Fleet's multilingual intelligence network, rebuilt for the age of sovereign publishing. The intellectual cargo, the doctrine, the frameworks, the narrative universes moves between linguistic territories that no single institutional publisher controls. It finds readers in registers that the major houses have structurally abandoned. It builds the kind of distributed, multi-jurisdictional intellectual presence that cannot be deplatformed from any single point because no single platform holds it all. Coda is the canon that built itself. In the end, the most precise tribute to Pirate Fast is not a comparison. It is a recognition. The historians of the golden age of piracy face a recurring problem. The primary sources were either written by the Empire, which portrayed pirates as monsters, or by the pirates themselves, which the Empire spent considerable energy suppressing. The authentic record, the articles, the crew agreements, the testimony of men who actually sailed those ships and built those alternative communities survived primarily because a handful of writers like Exquemelin and Johnson understood that the work of preservation was itself a political act. What MXTM has been doing since the 1990s is the same work. Not the piracy of theft, but the piracy of intellectual sovereignty, the systematic, disciplined, decades-long production of a primary source archive of ideas that the institutional order did not commission, does not control, and cannot suppress. The doctrines, the frameworks, the novels, the manifestos, the universe Bibles, the civic governance manuals, the circular economy blueprints, this is the ship's log of a voyage that the Academy has not yet recognized and the publishing industry has not yet caught up to. It will. The William and Mary effect guarantees it. The establishment will eventually build its cathedrals on this silver too. But the record exists. It is distributed across 4 languages, 30 years of continuous production, 700 documented publications, and a sovereign distribution architecture designed specifically to ensure it cannot be erased. The canon built itself outside the walls, in plain sight, without permission. That is the pirate's contribution to history. That is the Pirate Fast legacy. Anchor. Produced under the Pirate Fast Sovereign Publishing Archive. Aldea Zama, Tulum, Mexico. 2026. Discussion about this episode. Comments. Raise tax. Recent episodes. The Shadow Engine. 18 minutes ago MXTM AK Pirate 1 AVJ Tsunami X. The people who are already here. 12 hours ago MXTM AK Pirate 1 AVJ Tsunami X. Already here. 15 hours ago MXTM AK Pirate 1 AVJ Tsunami X. Vada da Campo. June 23rd MXTM AK Pirate 1 AVJ Tsunami X. Ground Truth. June 22nd MXTM AK Pirate 1 AVJ Tsunami X. The Rise of Contribution Capital. June 21st MXTM AK Pirate 1 AVJ Tsunami X. Redeem Nano Protocol. June 20th MXTM AK Pirate 1 AVJ Tsunami X. Redeem a Gold Light Civic Activation Protocol. June 20th MXTM AK Pirate 1 AVJ Tsunami X. Copyright 2026 MXTM and Vitsu AK Matansha Tranda.
They called us criminals. Every generation, different seas, same charge. Move the silver without a license. Feed the colony they let starve. Build the future they refuse to fund. We've been doing this since 6130. We're still doing it. About your navigation axe, the sea carries what it carries. It always pirate first. Sovereign by design.
First isn't a rebel. He's an exit strategist.
Burn the will! Ship the protocol!
Todavía. Señal pirata impresa.
Papel sobre píxeles, mantengo mi posición. Firmado, tasadores, mantengo mi posición. Firmado, tasado, repermiso de corazón. Correr en la esquina, el portal en ignición. No es impresión, es reclamo, visión MF. Papel sobre píxeles, el peso en mis manos. Ningún servidor mata lo que la tinta ha grabado. Tú acuñaste una duda, yo planes forjados. Tú tienes un recibo, yo términos firmados. Te vendieron un enlace, dueño de la ilusión. YP de fantasía en plena confusión. Hackearon tu cartera, ¿a quién vas a reclamar? La propiedad se esfuma.
NFPs are here, signed, priced, split, and anchored to a living page.
This isn't just a token. It's ownership, not access. It's time to take back the real world.
The non-fungible print, NFP. Paper strikes back. May 5, 2026. There's a quiet mistake humming through the last decade of digital ownership. We were told the token was the thing, that ownership could float, pure, abstract, unburdened by matter. And then the market blinked. Not because the idea was wrong, because it was incomplete. Closing line. I didn't bypass the system. I withdrew dependence from it and issued my own layer. Because my real power move here is not just issuing NFPs but making it a format that others start copying. You flex a hash, I flex a relic. My new track #PaperOverPixels is for the pirates navigating the narrative capture. No gas, no gate, just wait. Ownership isn't a link. It's an NFP vision. #hyperreality, #post-NFT, #NFP, #organichouse, #pirate V1. Full paper over pixels on YouTube.
Yeah.
Priced, split, and anchored to a living page. No wallets, no chains, no disappearing links. Just a claim you can hold and a deal you can read. Front, the signal. Back, the terms. Between them, no ambiguity. This isn't a drop. It's issuance. Not a print. Position.
MXTM Studios, Sovereign Residency and Cultural Partnership Proposal.